What did Israel do with the women of Moab that angered God? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Numbers on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Numbers chapter 25. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 9. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Numbers chapter 25, beginning at verse 1. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Every one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal of Peor." And indeed one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Now when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body. So the plague was stopped among the children of Israel. And those who died in the plague were 24,000. We have spent the last 3 chapters looking at the prophecies of Balaam. Unlike most of what we would consider minor figures in the Old Testament, Balaam is one that is remembered throughout much of Israel's history and is even mentioned multiple times in the New Testament, but not as a character to emulate. By making just a casual read of Numbers 22 to 24, we might come away thinking that Balaam was a man of God. For after all, God spoke to him, and he said that he would not go further than what God had revealed to him. But Balaam was a prophet who would be tempted by money. And as we'll see with the events of this chapter, he was not really wanting to bless Israel, but couldn't curse them because God wouldn't allow him to. Balaam's prophecies confirmed that fact, as well as providing Balak, king of Moab, a prophecy that one day a king would rise up who would crush Moab. We said that the physical fulfillment of this prophecy was King David, but the spiritual fulfillment was Jesus Christ, who subdued all kingdoms, in that his kingdom is more powerful and would last forever. Getting now to the events of chapter 25, we return to the narrative that focuses on Israel itself, as the last 3 chapters didn't seem to happen with Israel's knowledge. Israel remains in the Acacia Grove, which is in the plains of Moab across from Jericho, the place where we left off with them in Numbers 22 verse 1. Now if you recall, we had said that the plains of Moab were north of the Arnon River, which was the northern border of the Moabite territory. However, at an earlier point, Moab's land stretched up this far. We said that this could be called the plains of Moab either because Moab at one point came up this far, and the name simply wasn't changed, or because Moab controlled a small portion of this region. From the fact that there were Moabite women up here seems to, and is an indication of the latter. However, again, their presence doesn't necessarily prove that these Moabites simply didn't live in the region, being allowed to stay there by the Amorites who had previously taken the land before Israel destroyed them. But the presence of these women here presented a stumbling block for Israel, because Israel began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab, which led them to bow down to their gods, offer sacrifices to them, and worship them. Physical harlotry has always been condemned as sinful in Scripture, but by going after other gods, Israel was committing spiritual harlotry as well, which angered God even more. God was so angry that he told Moses to take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, meaning out in the open, so that the anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. And that's exactly what Moses had the judges of Israel do. However, in verse 6, things got even worse. There was a man in Israel, whose name we'll find out later on in the chapter, brought a Midianite woman and presented her to his brethren and before Moses while they were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. What exactly did this man do? In his arrogance, this man had no problem in bringing the object of his lust, this Midianite woman, to the tabernacle of meeting before Moses. Think about it. People were dying because they went after harlots, and here this man is strutting around with a harlot. Now when Phinehas, who was the son of Eleazar the high priest, saw it, he chased after the man and the woman to their tent with a javelin. And when he caught up with the couple, he thrust through both of them, that they died. And so once this was done, the plague was stopped among the children of Israel, but not before 24,000 people had died because of Israel's sin. This story is referenced by Paul in the book of 1 Corinthians, so let's keep note of it for when we get to that study, Lord willing, sometime in the future. However, before closing, at the end of the last lesson, we said that we'd have more to say about Balaam leaving and going home at the end of the last chapter. From later on in our study of Numbers, as well as from numerous references elsewhere in Scripture, we're going to find out that Balaam didn't leave right away, but actually provided Balak advice as how to have God become angry with Israel. In the book of Revelation, we find out that it was Balaam who put into the mind of Balak to have Israel seduced by these harlots and have them influence Israel to worship other gods. Balaam had said that he would not curse the people whom God had blessed, nor would he go beyond God's words. But we had noted numerous times that Balaam really didn't want to bless Israel. It was just that that's what God had him do. In providing Balak with this advice, he wasn't directly cursing Israel, but he did know that God would be greatly displeased by Israel's behavior if they did this, which would achieve Balak's desired result. Just some words to think about then when it comes to the character of Balaam. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Numbers chapter 25, verses 10 to 18, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.